Tonight we sit with a quiet question, one that has lingered at the edges of maps and campfires for as long as people have walked into the trees. Before we go any further, if you want a brand new Earth topic every single night to fall asleep to, subscribe. One tap and a new story is waiting for you every evening. The question is simple to ask and very hard to answer. Why do some people in some places walk into the wilderness and never return? Imagine for a moment the slow turning of the earth scene from a great height. The land below is not flat or empty. It is wrinkled and folded, draped in dark green forests and pale gold deserts, stitched with rivers, dotted with lakes the color of soft glass. There are mountains with shoulders of stone and valleys that hold the morning mist for hours. There are swamps that breathe slowly in the heat, and tundra that stretches in every direction without a single landmark to hold onto. In these wide and gentle wildernesses, most days pass without incident. Hikers come and go. Hunters return to their cabins. Children chase each other up a slope and back down to the picnic blanket. The wild is not, by itself, a hostile place. It is older than us, patient, and mostly indifferent. It hums with insects, with wind through pine needles, with the soft creak of branches in the late afternoon. And yet, threaded through the long human story of these places, there are reports. Quiet reports. People who stepped behind a tree and were never seen again. Travelers who paused to rest beside a stream and left their pack behind, neatly folded, as if they meant to return. Children who lagged behind their family by 20 paces, then by 10, then by none. These stories are not new. They appear in old letters, in newspaper clippings yellowed at the edges, in the careful notebooks of park rangers and county sheriffs going back more than 100 years. They appear in the oral histories of communities who have lived beside certain forests, certain mountains, certain stretches of cold water for many generations. The names of the places change. The shape of the puzzle stays oddly similar. The question this episode sits with is not a frightening one. It is a wondering one. Why do certain remote landscapes seem to gather these stories? Why do some valleys, some ridges, some stretches of swamp appear in the records again and again, while other equally wild places appear hardly at all. Is this a real pattern? Or is it a trick of the way humans tell stories? We do not yet know. There are sensible explanations, and we will sit with several of them across the long, quiet hours ahead. Some researchers point out that wherever many people go to hike, many people will get lost. Popular trails see more visitors, so they see more accidents, and the math is not mysterious at all. Others wonder if certain landscapes hold features that confuse the body and the mind in subtle ways. Thick fog, featureless boulder fields, sound that bends around ridges, slopes that look gentle from above and steepen without warning. There are also older explanations gathered from folklore, stories of places where compasses spin, places where time feels strange, places the local people simply do not enter after dusk, and have not entered for as long as anyone remembers. These stories may be metaphors for genuine hazards. They may be the long shadow of a single tragedy that grew in the retelling. They may be something else. The honest answer is that we are still sorting through the evidence. Tonight, we will move slowly through these wildernesses, the way a careful walker moves through tall ferns. We will look at the granite slopes and the dense woodlands. We will visit the swamps and the deserts and the high country where the air thins. We will listen to what survivors have said when they returned, and we will sit gently beside the cases where no one ever did. We will not solve the puzzle. The puzzle, as far as anyone can tell, has not been solved. That is, in a way, the gift of this question. It does not demand an answer. It only asks us to wonder, while the night settles in around us, what it might mean that the wild is so vast and so old and so quietly capable of keeping a few of its secrets to itself. So let your shoulders soften. Let the lamp grow dim. The trees are very tall tonight and very patient, and we have many slow hours to wander among them together. Before we wonder about the strange patterns, let us first sit with the simple shape of the thing itself. A wilderness disappearance, in the plainest terms, is a story with a beginning and a middle, but no clear end. Someone walks into a wild place. They do not walk out. Sometimes they are found. Sometimes they are not. Sometimes they are found in a way only adds more questions to the quiet pile. These stories are older than any of us. They are older than the trails we mark with paint on tree bark, older than the maps folded into our pockets. People have been walking into forests and not returning for as long as people and forests have shared the world. The oldest written accounts in many cultures include some version of this tale. A hunter steps past a familiar bend. A child wanders just out of sight of the cabin. A traveler crosses a ridge and is simply, softly gone. To understand what we are wondering about, it helps to picture the scale of the places involved. The boreal forest, that great green belt of pine and spruce wrapping the northern world, covers around 11 million square kilometers. If you could lay it flat and walk across it, you could walk for months and never see the same tree twice. Within forests like these, a single national park might hold 2,000 or 3,000 square kilometers of dense woodland. That is roughly the size of a small country, folded into ridges and rivers and silence. A grown adult walking steadily on good ground covers about 5 kilometers in an hour. In thick forest, with fallen logs and tangled undergrowth, that number drops by half, sometimes more. A child can move slower still, or in rare bursts of fear, faster than seems possible. When you put a small moving figure inside such a vast, still place, the math becomes almost unbearable. Searchers often describe it as looking for a coin dropped somewhere in a city the size of Lowe's angels, except the city is made of trees and the coin can move. The numbers themselves are part of the mystery. In the United States alone, the National Park Service handles thousands of search and rescue incidents each year. Most end well. The lost hiker is found within a day, tired and embarrassed and grateful. But a small fraction do not end. Estimates vary, and the record keeping across agencies is famously uneven, which is part of why this topic resists clean answers. Some researchers suggest that hundreds of people remain unaccounted for in American wildlands across recent decades. Others argue the true number is smaller, hidden inside ordinary categories of missing persons. The honest answer is that no single agency keeps a tidy ledger of the wilderness lost. forests themselves are very old. The trees may be young, only a century or two, but the ground beneath them remembers far more. A mature, temperate forest floor can hold thousands of years of leaf fall, compressed into dark, spongy soil. Walk on it, and your boot sinks half an inch into time. The rocks beneath that soil may be hundreds of millions of years old, granite that cooled before the first tree ever grew. When a person disappears into such a place, they vanish into something deep, something patient, something that has absorbed countless small mysteries already. The forests are also, in a quiet way, alive in ways we still do not fully understand. The fungal networks that thread between tree roots can stretch for kilometers underground. The canopy holds its own weather, cooler and damper than the air outside. Sound behaves strangely beneath the trees. A voice calling from 200 meters away can sound like it comes from everywhere or nowhere. Visibility, even on a bright afternoon, often drops to 50 meters or less. Inside that small bubble of sight, a person can pass within a stone's throw of rescuers and never be seen. This is the basic shape of the thing. Vast landscapes, small moving figures, old ground that keeps its own counsel, and a thin scattering of cases across centuries and continents that refuse to settle into easy explanation. In the sections to come, we will look at the patterns people have claimed to see in these stories, and at whether those patterns hold up when examined carefully. We will sit with the terrain itself, with the weather, with the strange behavior of cold and fatigue on the human mind. We will not solve anything tonight. That is not the purpose. The purpose is to learn the simple outlines of an old, soft mystery, and to let it rest beside you while you rest. The idea that certain landscapes claim more than their share of missing people did not arrive all at once. It grew slowly, the way moss grows on a stone, gathered from old logbooks, search reports, newspaper clippings, and quiet conversations between rangers at the end of long days. Somewhere along the way, a thought began to take shape. What if the wild was not random in who it kept and who it returned? What if some places, for reasons we cannot fully explain, gathered more silence than others? The notion is older than the maps we have for it. Long before anyone tried to count cases or plot them on a chart, mountain communities spoke of slopes where shepherds wandered off and never came back. Coastal villages whispered about coves where fishermen rowed out in calm weather and were never seen again. Forest people in many lands warned their children away from certain hollows, certain ridges, certain stretches of river. The warnings rarely came with reasons. They came with names, and the names were enough. In the modern era, people began to try to count. Search and rescue teams kept records. National parks logged their incidents. Researchers and writers pulled the numbers together and began to look for shapes inside them. They asked whether some landscapes really did appear more often than chance would suggest. They asked whether the clusters were real, or whether the human mind was simply doing what it always does, which is to find faces in clouds and meaning in noise. The honest answer, even now, is that no one is entirely sure. One view holds that certain regions truly do produce a higher rate of strange or unresolved disappearances beyond what their visitor numbers would predict. This view points to recurring themes in the case files. Footwear left behind. Items found in odd places. Bodies recovered when they are recovered at all, in spots that had already been searched. To those who hold this view, the patterns feel too consistent to be accident. A competing view is just as careful and arrives at a different place. It suggests that the apparent clusters are mostly an artifact of attention. Popular parks see millions of visitors. Rugged terrain naturally hides what falls into it. Cold and altitude impair judgment in ways that look uncanny from the outside, but are well understood by physiologists. From this angle, the pattern is not in the land. The pattern is in how we count and in which stories we choose to remember. Both views agree on one quiet fact. The wild is enormous. Even a small forest, walked end to end, contains more hiding places than any search party can examine in a lifetime. A single fallen log can shelter a person from view. A single ravine can swallow a footprint. When you multiply that by thousands of square miles of ridge and bog and timber, the question changes shape. It becomes less about whether the land is strange, and more about whether our expectations were ever reasonable to begin with. Still, the sense of pattern persists, and it persists for a reason worth sitting with. Human beings are pattern finders by deep design. We evolved in landscapes where noticing a repeated shape in the grass could save a life. That gift does not switch off when we read a list of missing persons. It hums along quietly, lining up the cases, drawing soft lines between them, asking whether the lines mean anything. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they do not. The hard work is telling which is which, and that work is far from finished. Some researchers have tried to run the numbers more carefully, comparing disappearance rates to visitor counts, to terrain difficulty, to weather records, to the age and experience of those who went missing. When they do, many of the famous clusters soften. They do not vanish entirely, but they begin to look less like signatures and more like consequences of crowded trails crossing difficult ground. Other clusters hold up better under that kind of scrutiny, and those are the ones that keep the question alive. So the origin of this whole inquiry is not a single discovery. It is a slow accumulation. Old stories met new statistics. Folklore met search and rescue logs. The wild kept doing what the wild has always done, and people kept noticing and counting and wondering. Out of that long, quiet gathering came the question we still cannot answer cleanly. Do certain landscapes truly draw disappearance toward them? Or are we simply drawing our maps around the places where we already expected to find sorrow? For now, both possibilities remain on the table. The clusters that may not be clusters. The patterns that may, in some places, be real after all. Tonight, it is enough to know the question exists and to let it rest beside us in the dark. Step into a boulder field at dawn, and you begin to understand why these places hold so many quiet stories. The ground is no longer ground. It is a sea of stone, frozen in mid-motion, each rock the size of a car or a small house. They lean against each other at odd angles. Gaps open between them, some shallow, some deep enough to swallow a person whole. The light slants in low, and the shadows between the boulders look like doorways into the earth. These fields are made mostly of granite, one of the oldest and most common rocks on the surface of the planet. Granite is a mix of three simple minerals. There is quartz, the clear glassy grain that catches the light. There is feldspar, the pale pink or cream-colored crystal that gives granite its rosy blush. And there is mica, the dark flake that glitters when you turn the stone in your hand. Together, these minerals cooled deep underground millions of years ago. The atoms inside them, silicon, oxygen, aluminum, potassium, were forged long before the Earth itself, inside ancient stars that exploded and seeded the early solar system with the building blocks of worlds. The boulders did not arrive here all at once. Some were carved out by glaciers that crept down from the high country during the last ice age. The ice picked them up, carried them for miles, and dropped them when it melted. Others tumbled from cliffs above, breaking loose as freeze and thaw worked tiny cracks wider each winter. Water seeped in. Water froze. The ice expanded, pushed, and pried. Over thousands of winters, whole hillsides came apart and slid into long tongues of jumbled stone. This is what makes boulder fields so strange to walk across. The surface is uneven and unstable. A stone that looks solid may rock under your boot. A gap that looks shallow may drop 10 feet into a hidden chamber. Search teams who have worked these slopes describe the same difficulty. A person can step into a space between two rocks and simply be gone from view. They might be only a few feet below the surface, hidden under a stone roof, invisible from above. Dogs lose the scent. Drones see only stone. Some researchers wonder if this is part of why certain mountain ranges keep appearing in disappearance reports. Places built on granite, the Sierra Nevada, parts of the Appalachians, stretches of the Rockies, share this kind of broken terrain. The geology itself creates hiding places that no one designed. Other researchers push back on this idea. They point out that these same ranges also see the most hikers, the most visitors, the most chances for someone to go missing. More people walking, they argue, means more people lost. The pattern may be in the numbers of feet on the trail, not in the stone beneath them. Still, the granite holds something worth thinking about. These rocks contain small amounts of iron and other magnetic minerals. few rare spots, a compass needle will twitch and drift when held close to a particular boulder. The effect is usually tiny, hardly enough to lead anyone astray, but the lore around these mountains is full of stories about compasses behaving oddly, of hikers feeling turned around in places where the path seemed clear. Whether the rocks themselves can really confuse a person is an open question. The science says the magnetic pull is too weak to matter. The stories say otherwise. The truth probably sits somewhere quieter, where a faint anomaly meets a tired mind, and the two together write a memory that feels stranger than it was. There is also the matter of sound. Granite slopes scatter noise in unusual ways. A voice calling from one ridge can seem to come from another. A river running below can be heard above and to the side, never quite where the ear places it. For a person walking alone, already unsure of the way, this scattering of sound can pull them in the wrong direction. They follow what they think is a call for help. They follow what they think is the river back to the trail. The granite does not mean to deceive. It simply reflects. So the building blocks of these places, the quartz, the feldspar, the mica, the iron, are not sinister. They are ordinary minerals that have been on this planet longer than any forest or any person. They sit where the glaciers left them. They catch the morning light, and yet, for reasons we still do not fully understand, certain arrangements of these stones seem to gather lost stories the way a low place gathers rain. The question of why remains open, and the granite, for now, keeps its quiet. Many people who have come back from a wilderness ordeal speak of the same strange thing. They describe a hush, a sudden quiet that seemed to settle over the trees or the rocks or the open ground just before they realized they were lost. The wind, they say, dropped away. The birds, who had been chattering only moments earlier, fell silent. And in that quiet, something inside them shifted. A small confusion grew into something larger. Whether this hush is real, or whether it lives mostly in memory, is one of the gentle mysteries of these stories. Survivors recall it again and again. Hikers, hunters, foragers, soldiers on training routes. They describe the same soft drop in sound, the same odd stillness the same feeling that the world had paused. But the human brain is a careful editor. It rewrites moments after they happen, and when something frightening unfolds, the brain tends to add weight to the seconds just before. The hush may be the body listening harder. It may also be the air, the weather, or the land itself. There are forces in the wilderness that can produce a true acoustic hush. Cold, dense air can pool in low valleys at certain hours, especially near dawn and dusk. That dense air bends sound waves and traps them low, so the small noises of the forest seem to disappear. A thick blanket of fresh snow can swallow sound entirely. Muffling footsteps and bird calls, and even the distant rush of a river, damp moss on tree trunks, soft humus on the forest floor, layers of fallen leaves. All of these absorb sound the way thick curtains absorb sound in an empty room. In some places, the natural quiet is so deep that a person can hear their own pulse in their ears. Wind plays its own quiet trick. In mountain valleys, a steady breeze can carry a hiker's voice in only one direction. A friend calling from 100 steps away may sound as if they are calling from half a mile in the wrong direction. Sound in folded terrain bends around ridges, bounces off rock walls, and weakens unpredictably. One theory holds that many wilderness disappearances begin with a simple acoustic confusion. A person turns toward a voice that is not where they think it is. They walk a little farther than they meant to, and the small error grows. There is another force at work that does not announce itself. The earth has a magnetic field, the same field that points a compass needle toward the north. In most places, that field is steady and predictable. But in some regions, deep iron-rich rocks beneath the surface tug on a compass and pull the needle slightly off course. These local magnetic anomalies are well documented in parts of the Canadian Shield, in pockets of the Appalachians, and in certain volcanic ranges. A traveler who trusts the compass too much and the landmarks too little can wander gently sideways without noticing. Whether such anomalies play any meaningful role in disappearances is debated. Some researchers point to the math and say the effect is far too small to matter. Others wonder if, on a long and tiring day, Even a small drift can carry a person past the last familiar tree. Cold itself is a quiet force. As body temperature drops, the brain begins to make poorer decisions long before the body feels truly endangered. Judgment slips. The sense of direction softens. Some people in early hypothermia describe a strange calm, even a warmth, even a pleasant fogginess. This may be why search teams sometimes find clothing removed and folded near a final resting place. The phenomenon is called paradoxical undressing, and it is one of the saddest and most studied behaviors in cold exposure cases. It reminds us that the forces shaping a disappearance are not always external. Some of them act from inside the body. Heat works the same way in deserts and dry canyons. Dehydration thickens the blood, slows the brain, and bends perception. Distances stretch. Shadows take on shapes that are not there. A familiar ridge can look unfamiliar in the wrong light at the wrong hour. So, the hush before a person vanishes may be many things at once. It may be cold air pooling silently in a low place. It may be a snowfall absorbing the small sounds of the world. It may be a tired brain narrowing its attention, gathering itself for an effort it does not, yet know it will need. We cannot say for certain which forces are at play in any one story. We can only sit, for now, with the quiet they describe and wonder what truly passes through that stillness. Weather in the wild does not always behave the way we picture it from a window at home. Out in the open country, on a high ridge, or in a wide forest, weather has room to grow and shift and fold back on itself. A clear blue morning can turn to thick gray fog in less than an hour. A warm afternoon can drop 40 degrees by sundown. To understand why so many people vanish in remote places, it helps to feel the sheer scale of the air around them. Think of a single cloud drifting over a meadow. A small fair-weather cloud, the kind that looks like a puff of cotton, often weighs more than 1,000,000 pounds. That much water, hanging quietly in the sky, held up by nothing but rising warm air. Now picture that cloud thickening, sinking lower, spreading wider, until it touches the ground as fog. You are no longer looking at the weather. You are inside it. Fog can reduce visibility from miles to a few feet in minutes. A hiker who could see a mountain peak at breakfast may not be able to see their own boots by lunch. In that gray hush, the brain loses its anchors. Trees become shadows. Trails fade into soft white walls. Sound bends in odd ways because tiny water droplets scatter the noise of your own footsteps and throw it back at strange angles. Some search and rescue teams say fog is the single most disorienting condition a lost person can face, more confusing even than darkness. Now widen the view. A storm system rolling across a mountain range can stretch 300 miles across and rise 8 miles into the sky. If you shrunk that storm down to the size of a dinner plate, a human being would be smaller than a single grain of pepper on its rim. We are tiny creatures inside enormous weather, and the storm does not know we are there. Temperature adds another layer to the puzzle. In high country, the air cools by roughly 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet you climb. A valley floor at 70 degrees can become a ridge at 40 degrees in just a few hours of walking. Add wind, and the felt temperature drops further. A breeze of 20 miles per hour on bare skin at 40 degrees feels closer to freezing. The body begins to lose heat faster than it can make it, and the mind, starved of warmth, starts to make quiet mistakes. Snow brings its own strange scale. A single snowflake weighs about as much as a feather, yet a fresh snowfall of 1 foot over a square mile lays down roughly 13,000 tons of frozen water. That blanket smooths every shape on the ground. Boot prints fill in within minutes. Trail markers disappear. Landmarks that looked sharp in summer become rounded, blurred, identical. Searchers describe walking past the same fallen log 3 times because the snow had erased every clue that told it apart from its neighbors. Wind on a mountainside can reach 100 miles per hour, faster than most highway traffic. At those speeds, voices cannot carry. A person calling for help from 50 feet away may not be heard. A whistle blown into that wind may sound, to the searcher, like nothing more than a distant bird. The scale of the noise drowns the scale of the human inside it. Some researchers wonder whether sudden, severe, weather plays a quiet role in many wilderness disappearances. The theory is gentle and reasonable. A person caught in fast-moving fog or a sudden cold front becomes confused, leaves the trail, and ends up far from where searchers expect. Others push back. They point out that experienced hikers know how to shelter in place, and that many missing person cases involve clear, mild weather with no obvious trigger at all. Both views hold pieces of the truth, and the question of how much weather explains remains open. What seems certain is the mismatch in size. A human body is about 6 feet tall and weighs less than 200 pounds. The weather around that body can stretch for hundreds of miles and shift in minutes. The forest beneath the weather can swallow a person inside a single bend in the trail. We move through these places as small, warm, breathing creatures inside vast systems that pay us no mind. That is part of what makes these stories linger. Not malice, not mystery for its own sake, but the simple, staggering scale of the natural world compared to the small, soft scale of a person inside it. The wilderness is not trying to hide anyone. It is only being what it has always been: enormous, indifferent, full of weather that comes and goes without asking. Picture a soft forest floor in the early morning. The light is gray and gentle. A thin mist hangs in the air, low to the ground, hiding the roots of the trees in pale wool. The soil is damp from an overnight rain. Pine needles lie in loose mats, dark and fragrant, pressed into the earth. Patches of moss glow faintly green between stones. The whole floor is the kind of soft, giving surface that should remember every step, every boot print, every bent twig, every brush of a sleeve against a fern. This is the surface that searchers walk when someone has vanished. And this is where one of the quieter puzzles of wilderness disappearance lives: the puzzle of the missing footprints. In many cases, the trail goes cold in a place where a trail should be easy to find. The ground is soft. The grass is tall. The mud is fresh. A person who walked here ought to have left some mark. A boot heel pressed into clay. A scuff on a wet log. A torn cobweb at shoulder height. Searchers are trained to read these tiny signs. They look for crushed lichen on rock, for overturned pebbles whose damp undersides have not yet dried, for the thin line of bent grass where a leg has passed through. In a fresh search, the smallest disturbance can tell a whole story, and yet sometimes no story appears. The last clear print sits at the edge of a meadow, and the meadow holds nothing. The last broken branch hangs over a stream, and the far bank is undisturbed. The person seems to have stepped off the world. The plain explanations are real, and they matter. Rain washes prints away. Wind shifts pine needles back into place. A few hours of bright sun bake mud into a smooth crust that holds nothing. Animals walk through and overprint the human marks with their own. A heavy dew can lift bent grass back upright by mid-morning. Hard surfaces, granite, dry leaves, dense root mats, simply do not record footsteps the way soft mud does. Many missing trails are missing because the ground itself does not keep memory. There is also the question of how people walk when they are lost. A tired hiker shortens their stride. They drag their feet less. They tend to follow the path of least resistance, which often means hard ground, rocky shelves, dry stream beds. These are exactly the surfaces that do not preserve prints. Someone who is cold and confused may unknowingly choose the very roots that erase them. Searchers also speak of something called scent pooling. A trained dog follows the small flakes of skin and the chemistry of breath that a person leaves behind in the air. In still, cold valleys, that scent can settle into low spots and confuse the dog into circling. In wind, the scent can be pulled sideways, away from the actual track. A dog that loses the trail at a clearing has not necessarily lost the person. It may have only lost the air that held them. Still, even when all of this is accounted for, certain cases unsettle the people who work them. A child found miles from the last footprint, with no marks between. A hiker whose pack sits neatly beside a trail that shows only their inbound steps, never their outbound. A trail of prints that simply stops in soft snow, with clean snow stretching in every direction. These are the cases that get retold around fires and in quiet offices late at night. One theory is that we overestimate how well surfaces record movement. Forest floors are busier than they look. Squirrels, deer, rain, and falling cones are constantly rewriting the page. A print that seemed permanent at dawn can be gone by dusk. Another theory is that lost people travel farther than searchers expect, especially in the first hours, when fear and adrenaline keep them moving. A person can cover ground faster than any search grid can be drawn around them. By the time the dogs arrive, the missing prints may simply lie outside the circle, and a third possibility, harder to test, is that the eye misses what it is not expecting. A searcher walking a known route may step right past a faint scuff because the brain has already decided the trail is empty. What remains open is whether the missing footprints are a real anomaly or a trick of the surface itself. The forest floor is soft, but it is not a notebook. It records some things, forgets others, and keeps its own quiet counsel about the rest. We walk across it, and it answers in fragments. Tonight, we sit with those fragments, and with the mist that softens the ground between them. A forest looks simple from above. From a passing aircraft, the canopy spreads in a soft green blanket, gently rolling, almost calm. From the ground, though, a dense woodland is something else entirely. It is a folded, layered, three-dimensional puzzle. And that puzzle may be one of the quiet reasons certain places keep showing up in stories of the missing. Picture a slope of old-growth forest in the Pacific Northwest. The trees rise 200 feet or more, their trunks thick as small houses. Beneath them, smaller trees crowd in. Beneath those, shrubs and ferns weave together in a green tangle. Fallen logs lie everywhere, some of them larger than cars, slowly rotting into soft mounds covered in moss. To walk 1 mile through this kind of terrain can take many hours. A searcher standing 50 feet from a person on the ground might not see them at all. This is what specialists sometimes call visual occlusion. The forest hides things, not in a strange or unnatural way, just in the ordinary way that thick green walls hide whatever is behind them. A jacket the color of bark, a pack the color of moss, a small figure curled at the base of a log. these can disappear in plain sight, even when help is very close. Folded terrain makes this harder still. Many wild forests grow on slopes that twist and bend, full of small ravines and hidden gullies. From a ridge, you might be looking down at what seems like a smooth green slope. In truth, that slope is cut by dozens of narrow folds, each one deep enough to hide a person completely. Searchers walking along the rim may pass within yards of someone tucked into one of those folds and never know it. The land itself is doing the hiding. One theory in the search and rescue community is that this combination of dense vegetation and folded ground explains many of the puzzling cases. A person becomes lost. They wander, perhaps for hours, perhaps for days. Eventually, they sit down to rest, or they fall, or cold takes its quiet toll. They end up in one of those countless small folds, beneath one of those countless mossy logs, and the forest simply closes over them. The mystery in this view is not really a mystery at all. It is geometry. It is the math of a vast green volume in which a single human body is very small. A competing view points out that this explanation, while sensible, does not seem to cover every case. Some missing people are eventually found in places that searchers swear they checked. Trained dogs walk the same ground twice and find nothing the first time and everything the second. Some bodies are recovered in open meadows that had been crossed many times during the search. The folded terrain idea may be most of the answer, but there is room left for other factors, ones that are harder to name. The honest truth is that we still do not fully understand how human attention works in a dense forest. Searchers are tired. Their eyes are tuned for movement, and a still shape blends quickly into a still background. The mind expects to see a person standing, walking, calling out. It does not always recognize a person who is silent, curled, or partly covered by leaves. Studies of visual search in cluttered environments suggest the eye can pass over a target many times without registering it. Whether that fully explains the strangest cases is still being argued. There is also the question of sound. A dense, folded forest swallows voices. A call from a ravine can travel up the slope and seem to come from a ridge far away. A whistle blown in a gully may not be heard 50 feet beyond the lip. People who have been lost often describe hearing searchers nearby and shouting back, only to listen as the voices move away. The forest, in its quiet way, scrambles the signals we depend on. What lies beneath the canopy, then, is not really a single landscape. It is many overlapping ones, the visible forest of trunks and ferns, the hidden forest of folds and hollows, the acoustic forest of bent and broken sound, the forest of tired eyes and expecting minds. Each layer adds its own quiet difficulty. Together, they form a place where a person can become very hard to find, even by careful, devoted searchers. So we sit with this layered puzzle. Some of the recurring clusters of disappearance may simply be the places where these layers stack most thickly. Others may have stories we cannot yet explain. The forest holds its quiet shape in the dark, folded and deep, and somewhere within it, certain answers remain just out of view. The land has hollows. It always has. Long before any person walked across a ridge with a map in their pocket, the rock beneath the forest was already shaped by slow water and slower time. Rain found its way into cracks. Cold winters split stone. Old streams carved tunnels through limestone and left them dry. The surface we walk on is not solid in the way our footsteps suggest. It is full of quiet rooms. Caves form on their own schedule. A single drop of water, slightly acidic from the soil above, can take 1,000 years to widen a hairline crack into a space the size of a fist. Over tens of thousands of years, that fist becomes a passage. Over millions, it becomes a hall. This is one of the deep rhythms of the planet. While forests grow and burn and grow again, while rivers shift their banks, the rock below is being patiently emptied out from the inside. Most of these hidden spaces are small. A slot between two boulders, a gap under a fallen tree where the soil has washed away, a narrow vertical crack in a granite face, the kind a person could slip into and not be seen from 10 feet away. Search teams know this terrain well. They speak of it carefully. When someone disappears in cave country, in karst country, in the broken ridges of an old mountain range. The ground itself becomes part of the mystery. The question of how often hidden spaces play a role is genuinely open. Some researchers argue that a meaningful number of unsolved wilderness cases may simply be people who fell into places no searcher could see. A leg breaks. A person crawls toward shelter. A small overhang becomes a final resting place, hidden under a season's worth of leaves. Others push back on this idea. They point out that trained dogs can often detect human scent through surprising amounts of rock and soil, and that thorough ground searches sometimes pass within feet of these features and still find nothing. The truth, as always, sits somewhere in the unmapped middle. Limestone country tells one version of the story. In regions where the bedrock dissolves slowly into long cave systems, the surface is dotted with sinkholes. Some are obvious bowls in the meadow. Others are masked by brush, by a thin lid of soil, by a tangle of roots that looks no different from any other patch of ground. A person walking at dusk, tired, looking up at the trees, might never see one. The opening may be no wider than a doorway. The drop beyond may be considerable. Granite country tells another, where great slabs of rock have shifted and tumbled over the slow grind of glaciation. The result is a jumble of stone with countless gaps between. These are called talus fields. From above they look like a gray sea of boulders. Up close, they reveal themselves as a labyrinth. Cold air pours up from below in the summer. In winter, snow bridges these gaps and hides them entirely. Step on the wrong patch and the bridge gives way. The cycles here are long and quiet. Caves breathe with the seasons, drawing air in during cold months and exhaling it in warm ones. Sinkholes deepen slowly with each rainfall. Talus fields settle a few inches every century as the stones below crumble. None of this is visible to a person on foot. The land seems still. It is not still. It is simply working on a clock that does not match ours. Some survivor accounts touch this theme without quite naming it. People who have been lost and then found speak of feeling the ground change beneath them in places they could not later locate. They describe stepping into a low pocket of cold air, hearing a hollow sound underfoot, finding themselves at the edge of something they could not see in the fog. Most of these moments end safely. The walker steps back. The fog lifts. The day goes on. The question is what happens in the unrecorded version when there is no one to step back with. This is the part of the mystery that resists easy theory. No camera flies low enough to see every gap in every boulder field. No dog can search every cubic foot of a hillside. The hidden spaces are simply too many, and the surface above them is too forgiving, closing over what falls in with leaves and snow and time. So the question lingers, gentle and unresolved. How many of the missing are simply held by the rock itself? In rooms the searchers never found, in folds of the planet that keep their own slow rhythm, far below the soft tread of any boot. Of all the small puzzles that gather around a wilderness disappearance, few are stranger than the things left behind. A boot set neatly on a log, a jacket folded once and placed on the ground, a backpack leaning against a tree, its straps still buckled. These objects sit quietly in the moss, in the leaves, in the dust of a trail, waiting to be found. And when searchers do find them, the objects rarely make the story clearer. More often, they make it stranger. Searchers call these items personal effects. They are the small possessions a person carried into the woods, and the small possessions a person left behind. In most cases, the belongings are exactly where you would expect them to be, near the body, near the trail, near a place where someone sat down to rest. But in a smaller number of cases, the belongings sit far from the person, or far from the route, or arranged in a way that seems oddly careful. Searchers do not always know what to make of this. Neither do the families. One pattern that comes up again and again is the removal of clothing. A coat found neatly on a rock, shoes placed side by side, pants folded as if for laundry. To an outside listener, this can sound chilling, but cold weather researchers have a name for at least part of this puzzle. They call it paradoxical undressing. In the late stages of severe hypothermia, the small blood vessels near the skin can suddenly open, sending a rush of warmth across the body. The person, very confused and very cold, often feels as if they are burning. They take off their clothes. Sometimes they fold them. The brain, by then, is not working in the usual way. This explanation covers many cases, but not all. Some belongings are found in warm weather, far from any sign of cold stress. Some are found in places the missing person could not easily reach. Some are found with no body nearby at all, and no clear trail leading to or from them. In these cases, the search teams must consider other possibilities. A person may have set the item down for a reason that made sense at the time, then walked away and become lost. Animals may have moved objects after the fact. A bear, a coyote, a raven each can carry small things across surprising distances. What looks like an arrangement may simply be the work of curious paws and beaks. Then there is the puzzle of distance. A pack found 2 miles from its owner. A water bottle on a ridge above where the person was last seen. Walking up a steep slope without supplies seems to make no sense, but fatigue and confusion can push a wandering mind in strange directions. Studies of lost person behavior show that people often climb when they should descend, and descend when they should climb. They follow what feels easier, even when it leads away from rescue. A pack left behind may simply be the moment the body said no further. The owner, lighter now, kept walking. Searchers also speak of items that seem untouched by time. A hat resting on pine needles, still clean. A glove on a stone, still soft. These belongings can sit for days in plain view, in places that searchers swear they checked the day before. The team leaders usually offer a calm explanation. Search grids are imperfect. Light shifts. Eyes tire. A small object can hide inside a shadow the size of a hand. What looks like an object appearing out of nowhere is more often an object that was always there, quietly waiting in a fold of the landscape. Still, there are cases that resist every easy answer. A wallet found on a trail that was walked many times. A camera placed on a stump in a meadow no one remembers crossing. The belongings sit there like small questions written in cloth and leather and metal. The owner is not always found. The story is not always finished. The objects become the last sentence in a paragraph that simply ends. Researchers who study these patterns are careful to separate what is strange from what only seems strange. A folded coat in a cold forest is not a mystery. A folded coat on a summer afternoon, 3 miles from the last known footprint, in a place a tired hiker would not normally go. That is something else. The line between the two can be hard to draw. Both kinds of stories sit in the same files, side by side, waiting for someone to sort them. For tonight, the belongings rest where they were found, quiet and ordinary and unexplained, and the question of how they came to be there drifts gently into the trees. High up, where the trees grow short and twisted, the air begins to thin. The mountains rise into a place where breathing itself becomes work. Above 10,000 feet, the body must labor for every step. Above 14,000, even strong climbers feel the weight of the altitude in their chest and behind their eyes. This is the high country. It is one of the strangest places on Earth where people vanish, and the reasons may have as much to do with the body as with the land. The high country holds some of the most extreme conditions a hiker can meet. On certain peaks in the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevada, a summer afternoon can shift from warm sunshine to driving snow in less than an hour. Wind speeds on exposed ridges can reach over 100 miles per hour. Temperatures can drop 40 degrees in a single afternoon. The thinnest of air carries the loudest of weather. Above 12,000 feet, the oxygen in each breath is roughly 60% of what the body receives at sea level. The brain, which uses about 1/5 of all the oxygen in the blood, begins to slow. Judgment dulls. Simple decisions take longer. A wrong turn that would seem obvious at lower elevation can feel reasonable up here. Some researchers wonder if this is part of why certain high passes appear again and again in disappearance reports. A hiker who feels confident at the trailhead may, hours later and thousands of feet higher, no longer be quite the same person making the same kind of choices. The thinking mind has been quietly borrowed by the mountain. Other researchers push back on this idea. They point out that many high country disappearances happen to experienced climbers who have trained for altitude. Plenty of people walk these ridges every summer without trouble. The altitude alone, they argue, cannot explain why one person turns up safe and another never returns. There may be other forces at work in the thin air. Lightning, for one, finds the high country more often than the lowlands. Exposed peaks above the tree line draw strikes from summer storms with terrible frequency. A ridge that was calm at noon can become a humming, electric place by 2 in the afternoon. Some lost hikers may have taken shelter in the wrong cleft of rock at the wrong moment. Then there is the cold. Even in July, a night spent above timberline without proper gear can drop core temperature into a dangerous range. Hypothermia, the slow chilling of the body, brings its own strange behaviors. People in late-stage hypothermia have been known to remove their clothing, a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. They sometimes burrow into small spaces, tucking themselves into rock piles or thick brush in what is called terminal burrowing. Search teams have found people in places no one would think to look, deep beneath an overhanging stone or pressed into a hollow log. This may explain some of the stranger high country cases where a missing person is eventually found in a spot the searchers had already passed. Or it may not. The question remains open. Some of the recovery sites are so unlikely that even seasoned searchers shake their heads. The high country also plays tricks on the eyes. At elevation, the horizon stretches farther than it should. Distant peaks appear closer than they are. A pass that looks like an hour of walking may take half a day. Hikers running low on water or daylight have pushed on toward what seemed like a near goal, only to find the goal moving away from them with every step. There are stories of climbers who reached the summit of high peaks, signed the register at the top, and were never seen on the descent. There are stories of small parties where one person stopped to rest while the others walked ahead, and when the others returned, the resting one was gone. No tracks, no sign, only thin air and stone. These cases hold a particular weight in the lore of vanishing. They take place in some of the most thoroughly mapped wilderness on the continent. Helicopters have flown over the ridges. dogs have worked the trails. And still, in some of these cases, no answer has ever come. Whether the high country truly hides more people than the statistics would predict is a question still being studied. Some careful analyses suggest the apparent clustering is partly an artifact of how many people visit these famous peaks each year. Others find the patterns harder to dismiss. The mountains keep their counsel either way, standing in the thin, clear air, indifferent and quiet, while the questions drift up their slopes and find no answer at the top. Cold is one of the quietest forces on Earth. It does not announce itself. It does not roar like wind or crack like thunder. It simply settles in around a body, slow and patient, drawing warmth away through the skin, through the breath, through the soles of the feet. And in the wilderness, when a person is lost and cold is gathering, something strange begins to happen inside the mind. The thinking slows. The world starts to feel softer at the edges. And this is where some of the most puzzling details in disappearance reports begin to make a kind of sad sense. Researchers who study hypothermia have noticed something curious about people in the late stages of dangerous cold. Many of them remove their clothing. They unbutton their coats. They pull off their boots. They sometimes fold these items neatly and leave them on a rock or a log, as if setting them down before sleep. This behavior has a name in the medical world. It is called paradoxical undressing. One theory is that the small muscles in the blood vessels grow tired and let go. Warm blood rushes out toward the skin. The body suddenly feels hot, almost feverish, and the person reaches to pull off the layers that feel too heavy. This single detail has shaped how searchers read a scene in the woods. A folded jacket on a stump is not always a sign of struggle. Sometimes it is the quiet last gesture of a mind that no longer feels the cold the way it should. But the theory is not complete. Not every case fits. Some people in cold country vanish in mild weather when hypothermia should not yet be possible. Their clothing turns up neatly placed all the same. And so, the puzzle stays open at the edges. There is a second behavior that sleep researchers and rescue teams find even stranger. It is called terminal burrowing. People in the final stage of severe cold sometimes crawl into small, tight spaces under a fallen log, behind a boulder, into the hollow at the base of a tree. They tuck themselves into the smallest pocket of shelter they can find, almost like a small animal preparing for winter. Some scientists believe this is an ancient reflex, a ghost of behavior from deep in our evolutionary past, when warm bodies sought enclosed dens in the cold months. Others wonder if it is simply the mind grasping for any softness, any small darkness, any place that feels like rest. What this means for searchers is haunting. A person may be only a short distance from a trail, but tucked so deeply into a hollow that dogs walk past, helicopters fly over, and the eye sees only roots and bark. Whole search grids can pass within a few yards of someone hidden in this quiet way. It is one reason that decades later, hikers sometimes find a small set of remains beneath a rotting log in a place that was searched a dozen times. Cold also changes the way sound carries. On a still, freezing morning, the layers of air above the ground form a kind of shelf. Warm air sits above colder air, and noises bend along that boundary in odd ways. A voice calling from a ridge can sound as if it comes from a valley. A whistle blown by a searcher can seem to circle the listener, never settling in one place. People who have been lost in cold country sometimes describe hearing their own names called from far away, from directions that turn out to be empty when they walk toward them. Whether these are real distant voices bent by the air or echoes of memory in a tired mind is not always clear. There is one more small detail that searchers speak of quietly. The eyes of a person in deep cold often turn upward. The pupils grow wide. Colors fade. The world begins to look pale and dreamy, like an old photograph left in the sun. Survivors who have been pulled back from this edge sometimes describe a strange peace in those final moments before rescue. A sense that the snow was kind, that the trees were watching gently, that nothing hurt anymore. These are the tiny textures of the mystery: the folded coat, the hidden hollow, the bent voice, the wide eye looking up at a sky that no longer feels cold. They do not explain why certain valleys certain ridges, certain dark stands of pine collect more of these stories than others. They only remind us that the wilderness can take a person gently, in a hush, in details so small that whole search teams may walk through them without ever knowing what they have just passed. There is a kind of land that does not want to be mapped. It lies flat and dark and patient, neither solid ground nor open water, but something quieter in between. The old surveyors called these places by many names: swamp, bog, fen, mire, marsh. The names changed with the country and the century, but the trouble they caused stayed the same. A boot would sink. A pole would slide into soft mud and find no bottom. A path that ran true in the morning would be gone by afternoon, swallowed by black water and the slow drift of reeds. The early understanding of these landscapes came slowly and often through loss. In the lowlands of northern Europe, peat cutters working the bogs sometimes found human bodies preserved in the dark, wet ground. Skin like old leather, hair still combed. Some of these bog bodies were thousands of years old. The peat had held them gently, and the cold, acidic water had kept them from decay. To the people who first dug them up, this was a strange and unsettling discovery. It told them something the rest of the world had not yet taught. Slow water remembers. It keeps what it takes. Map makers in the 17th and 18th centuries struggled with these places more than with mountains or forests. A mountain stayed where it was. A bog moved. The edges shifted with the rains. A meadow that looked firm in August could be a shallow lake by April. Early travelers wrote of stepping onto bright green ground and feeling it ripple beneath them like a living skin. These were quaking bogs, mats of moss and root floating over deep, cold water. A person who broke through could vanish into the dark below without a sound. The surface would close over them, soft and green, as if nothing had happened. The science of wetlands came later and came carefully. In the 19th century, naturalists began to study peat by cutting long cores from the ground and reading the layers like pages in a slow book. They found pollen from plants that had grown thousands of years before. They found old wood, old bones, old leather. They began to understand that a bog is not a still thing. It is alive in a quiet, patient way. It grows from the bottom up. It sinks objects slowly and seals them away from air. This is why some bogs hold ancient roads of laid timber, built by people long gone, still resting where they fell. Search and rescue in such country has always been hard, and the old hunters knew it long before the science arrived. Dogs lose a scent in standing water. Footprints fill in within hours. A trail that crosses a marsh may simply end at the edge, with nothing to follow on the other side. In the fens of eastern England, in the great dismal swamp of the American Southeast, in the muskeg of the Canadian North, local people learned to give wide warnings to strangers. Stay on the high ground. Do not trust the green. Listen for the suck of the mud. There are mysteries here that still wait for an answer. Researchers studying disappearance reports have noticed that wetlands appear in the stories far more often than their share of the land would suggest. One theory is simple and physical. A lost person in difficult country is drawn toward open ground, and an open bog looks, from a distance, like an open meadow. Once they step in, the ground gives way, and there is little chance of leaving a trail. Another view is more careful. It points out that swamps and marshes are also where searchers cannot easily go, and where evidence breaks down quickly. The clusters in the data may reflect the limits of searching, not anything stranger about the land itself. Both ideas may be partly true. Neither has been settled. What we do know is that the slow waters of the world have been quietly taking things in for a very long time. Roman coins, Iron Age swords, wooden wheels, people. The bog does not give them back on any schedule we understand. Sometimes 1,000 years pass before a peat cutter finds a face in the dark, looking up at the sky again. It is a strange thought to hold at the edge of sleep. That under the moss and the reeds, in places that look like nothing at all, the ground is keeping a careful, silent record. The discovery of how wetlands work has taught us much. It has also taught us that some questions in country like this may only ever be answered by the land deciding, in its own slow time, to speak. The desert seems like the simplest place to find someone who has gone missing. Wide open ground, few trees, long sightlines that reach all the way to the horizon. A person standing in a flat desert can sometimes be seen from miles away, a small dark shape against the pale floor. And yet, of all the wild places where people vanish, the desert may be one of the strangest. It hides bodies in ways forests never could, and it does so in the open air, under a sky that holds no secrets at all. The first surprise is how quickly the desert can erase a trail. In a forest, a footprint can last for days in damp soil. In the desert, a single gust of wind can wipe a track clean in seconds. The sand lifts, drifts, and resettles. It fills the prints from behind as a person walks, like the ground is gently closing a door. Search teams have followed fresh tracks into open dunes, only to watch them disappear in front of their eyes. The person was there. The footprints were there. And then the wind shifted and the record was gone. Heat plays its own quiet trick. The desert floor in summer can climb above 70 degrees Celsius, hot enough to burn skin through clothing. That heat rises in shimmering waves and bends the light above it. Distant objects warp and float. A boulder a mile away can seem to lift off the ground, or split into two boulders, or vanish entirely behind a sheet of trembling air. Searchers scanning the horizon may look right past the missing person without ever seeing them. The eye sees something. The brain cannot quite decide what. Then there is the sand itself. Many people picture deserts as flat, but the great dune fields of the world rise and fall like frozen waves. Some dunes stand hundreds of meters tall. Between them lie deep, shaded valleys where a person could walk for hours without being seen from above. Aircraft searching from the sky may pass directly over someone resting in the shadow of a dune and never catch a glimpse. The geometry hides what the openness seems to reveal. The desert also confuses the sense of distance. With no trees, no buildings, no familiar scale, the mind has nothing to measure against. A ridge that looks like a short walk away may be 10 miles off. A rock that seems close may be the size of a house. People who become lost in the desert often misjudge how far they have come, and how far they still need to go. They drink their water too quickly, thinking the next ridge will bring help. The ridge brings only another ridge. Sound behaves strangely as well. In the deep desert, the air can grow so still that the silence feels almost solid. With no leaves to rustle and no animals stirring, a person may hear their own heartbeat in their ears. That silence can make a single faint sound, a footstep, a distant engine, a calling voice, seem to come from anywhere at all. Searchers have reported hearing cries for help from one direction, only to find the source somewhere else entirely. Sound bends across the warm and cool layers of desert air in ways the ear cannot easily trace. The shifting sands also bury and uncover, with no clear pattern, items lost decades ago sometimes surface in a single windy week, then disappear again the next season. Bones, shoes, scraps of cloth. They rise and sink with the dunes like objects floating on a slow ocean. This means that desert disappearances can stay unsolved for years, then briefly reveal a clue, then bury it once more before anyone can return to the spot. One open question is whether desert clusters of missing person reports reflect something unusual about the terrain, or simply reflect where people happen to wander unprepared. Some researchers point to the heat, the mirages, the dune geometry, and the wind erasure as a combination that hides ordinary tragedies in extraordinary ways. Others suggest that the desert simply punishes small mistakes more harshly than other environments. So a wrong turn that would be survivable in a forest becomes fatal in the open sand. Both views can be true at once. Neither fully closes the question. What remains strange is how a place so wide, so bright, so seemingly empty can swallow a person whole and leave nothing behind. The desert keeps its missing in plain sight, beneath a thin layer of moving sand, under a sky that watches everything and remembers nothing. The horizon stays clear. The wind keeps blowing. And somewhere out there, the dunes hold quiet answers they may never give back. One of the strangest threads running through wilderness disappearance accounts is the question of distance. How far can a person travel on foot in difficult terrain before they are found? or before the trail goes cold. The answers do not always match what searchers expect, and the gap between expectation and outcome is one of the quieter puzzles in this whole field. Search and rescue teams use models to predict how far a missing person might walk. These models take many things into account: the person's age, their health, the slope of the land, the weather, whether they were lost in daylight or at night. From these numbers, searchers draw a circle on the map. Inside that circle, they hope the person will be found. Most of the time, the models work. A lost hiker is usually found within a predictable distance from their last known point. A child wanders only so far before tiring. An older adult often stops sooner than expected, sitting down to rest in a sheltered spot. The patterns are real, and the math is honest. But there are cases where the patterns break. People are sometimes found much farther than the models suggest. Across ridges they should not have been able to climb. On the far side of rivers they should not have been able to cross. In valleys separated from the search area by miles of broken ground. These outliers are rare, but they are not imaginary. One theory is simple and human. Fear, adrenaline, and pure confusion can push a body well past its normal limits. A person who believes they are being followed, or who is panicked by the dark, may keep moving long after exhaustion should have stopped them. Pain fades into the background. Hours blur together. The legs keep walking even when the mind has gone quiet. By the time the person collapses, they may be far from where any reasonable model would place them. A competing theory points to time itself. If a person was missing longer than first believed, the distance traveled makes more sense. Perhaps they walked for 2 days, not one. Perhaps they doubled back, then set out again. Without a witness or a watch, the timeline is often a guess. Stretch the hours, and the miles stop seeming strange. In this view, the mystery is not the distance. It is the missing time. Then there is the role of moving water. A person who falls into a stream, even a small one, can be carried surprising distances by the current. Cold water saps strength quickly, and the body becomes passive cargo. Searchers walking the banks may pass within feet of a person who was swept far from the place they entered. Rivers connect basins that look separate on a map. They link one valley to the next through narrow gorges that no walker would choose to enter on foot. Animals can also move things. A backpack dragged by a curious creature, a jacket carried in the teeth of a predator and dropped a mile away. These small displacements can confuse a search, sending teams toward a point the person never reached. The belongings travel. The person does not. Wind and weather play their part as well. A hat lifted from a head by a strong gust can sail down a slope and lodge in a tree far below. A map blown out of a pocket can drift on the surface of a lake. None of these things prove the person walked where the objects ended up. They only prove that wilderness is a system of moving parts, and that every object within it is subject to the same quiet forces. What connects all of this is a single idea. The wilderness is not a still room with a person inside it. It is a slow, restless machine. Water flows, wind blows, animals roam. Slopes shed loose stones. Snow melts and reveals what was hidden, then falls again and hides it once more. A missing person is one element inside this larger motion, and the longer they are missing, the more the motion smears the evidence. This is why the question of distance traveled remains genuinely open in certain cases. The models are good, but they assume a person moving through a still world. The real world is never still, and when the outlier cases are studied closely, it is often impossible to say which factor mattered most. The fear, the time, the water, the wind, the animals, the cold. Each may have played a part. Each may have played none. The wilderness keeps its own accounting of distance. It does not always share the numbers. And so the circles on the map remain useful and humble, and sometimes a little too small. Search dogs are remarkable creatures. They move through the woods with their noses low, reading a world that humans can barely sense. A single human being sheds tiny skin cells with every step, and those cells fall onto the leaves and the soil and the moss. To a trained dog, this trail glows like a lit pathway through the trees. For more than a century, search teams have relied on this gift. And for more than a century, search teams have also met cases where the gift simply fails. The way dog tracking works has changed slowly over time. In the early days, hounds were bred and trained by feel, by tradition passed from one handler to the next. Today, search and rescue dogs follow careful protocols. They learn to track a specific scent, to ignore distractions, to signal their handler in quiet, precise ways. Equipment has changed too. Handlers now carry radios, GPS units, and detailed topographic maps. Helicopters bring teams to remote ridges in hours rather than days. The science of how scent moves through the air has been studied in labs and in the field. We know far more now than we did 100 years ago. And yet, in certain cases, the dogs still stop. The pattern is one of the strangest details in the literature of wilderness disappearances. A trained tracking dog will follow a person's scent for half a mile, or 3 miles. Then, at some unremarkable spot, the dog will sit down, or circle, or refuse to go forward. The handler may try again. The dog may lift its nose, sniff the wind, and look puzzled. The trail, by every sign the dog can read, simply ends. There are calm and reasonable explanations for this. Scent does not behave the way most people imagine. It is not a steady ribbon laid down on the ground. It is a cloud of tiny particles that drifts and pools and lifts on warm air. A change in temperature can pull scent upward into the canopy, where a dog cannot follow it. A sudden rain can wash it away. A stream crossing can break the trail entirely. Strong wind can scatter the scent so widely that no dog can read it. Dry ground holds scent poorly. Hot rock holds it even worse. Some researchers point out that what looks like a vanished trail is often just a trail the dog cannot smell from where it stands. Other explanations involve the person themselves. A lost hiker who climbs onto a boulder field may leave very little scent behind because their feet rarely touch soil. A person who wades through a creek for any distance may emerge somewhere a dog cannot easily find. A person carried by another animal, or a person who has stopped sweating from cold, may leave a faint trail that fades within hours. In high heat, scent rises fast. In deep cold, it can freeze in place and behave in strange ways. Each landscape rewrites the rules, but handlers who have worked these cases for decades will sometimes admit that not every broken trail makes sense. They speak carefully because they are careful people. They will say that most lost trails can be explained by weather, terrain, or time. They will also say that a small number cannot. The dog does its work perfectly. The conditions seem ordinary, and still the scent ends, as if the person stepped off the earth at that exact point. One theory is that we simply do not yet understand all the ways scent can be lost. The chemistry of human odor is complex. The way air moves through folded terrain is even more complex. There may be quiet conditions, rare combinations of humidity and slope and stone that erase a trail in ways our science has not yet mapped. Another theory is more human. Some researchers wonder if the dogs themselves, sensitive as they are, sometimes sense something that troubles them and choose not to continue. Whether that something is a predator scent, a sudden electrical change in the air, or something else entirely, the question remains open. The technology around searching keeps changing. Drones now scan ridgelines with thermal cameras. Cellular pings can sometimes place a phone within a few hundred meters. New tracking dogs are trained with methods that did not exist a generation ago. Each year, the tools grow sharper, and each year, most lost people are found more quickly than before. The cases that resist this progress are the ones that linger in the records, the small handful where every tool falls quiet and every method comes up short. The dogs lower their noses, search a few more circles, and then look up at their handlers with what can only be called patience, waiting for instructions no one knows how to give. Long before maps had edges drawn in ink, they had edges drawn in story. At the far corners of old parchment, where the known world thinned out, map makers used to paint dragons, sea beasts, and dark forests. The phrase was simple: "Here be monsters." It was a way of saying that beyond this line, the land has not been measured, and the people who walked into it did not always walk back. Every culture with deep forests, tall mountains, or wide deserts has stories like this. In the old Nordic woods, people spoke of the Huldra, a quiet figure glimpsed between birch trunks at dusk. In the Scottish Highlands, travelers told of the Ichus near lonely lochs. In the Appalachian hollows, the mountain people kept their own warnings, passed down in soft voices on long porches. The Iroquois told of stone giants who lived in the deep timber. The Sami of northern Lapland spoke of spirits in the fells. In Japan, the cedar groves held the Yamabiko, whose voice could echo back wrong and lead a walker astray. The patterns inside these stories are oddly similar. A person steps off the path. The light changes. Sound becomes muffled. Time stretches or shortens. They are gone for a day or a year or forever. When they return, if they return, they cannot quite say where they have been. It is tempting to dismiss all of this as superstition, and much of it surely is. People have always told stories around fires, and the wilderness is the perfect dark canvas for the imagination to paint on. Yet something more careful might be happening too. One view is that folklore is simply a memory system. Before maps, before written records, before search and rescue, communities needed a way to teach children which valleys to avoid, which slopes turned deadly in fog, which ponds had soft edges that swallowed a foot. Wrapping a warning in a story made it stick. The Huldra was not a literal being. She was a way of saying, do not follow strange lights into the trees at twilight. A competing view holds that folklore exaggerates and obscures more than it teaches. By turning real cold, real cliffs, and real bears into magical figures, the stories may have made the wilderness seem more uniformly dangerous than it actually is, hiding the specific patterns that matter most. Both views may be partly true. We do not know which one dominates. The light in these old stories is worth sitting with. In nearly every tradition, light is the trigger. The shimmer of low sun through pines, the pale glow of mist over a marsh at dawn, a lantern that seems to bob just ahead on the trail, never closer, never farther. Marsh gas can ignite in soft blue flickers above wet ground, and old people called these will owe the wisps and lights of the dead. Modern scientists believe most are phosphine and methane reactions, gentle and rare. But the experience of seeing one alone in the dark has a power that no chemistry lesson quite erases. There is also the matter of edges. Folklore tends to cluster on edges. The edge of the village, the edge of the field, the line where cultivated land becomes wild forest, the bank of the river, the mouth of the cave. These are exactly the places where, statistically, disappearances are more likely. They are transition zones where a person crosses from one kind of terrain into another, often without noticing. One theory is that the human mind itself struggles at these edges, losing track of landmarks as the texture of the ground shifts. Another theory is simpler, that edges are just where more people walk, so more people are lost there. We cannot fully separate the two. What is striking is that modern disappearance accounts sometimes echo the old folklore in ways their authors do not seem to intend. Survivors describe a sudden hush in the woods, a strange quality of light, a feeling of being watched, or of the path bending in a way it should not. These details may come from real perceptual effects of fatigue, low blood sugar, and fear. They may also come from the brain reaching for the only language it has, the language of ghost stories told long ago, or both layered together. The edge of the map has moved. Satellites now look down on nearly every forest and ridge. Yet the inner edge, the place where a person feels the wild close around them and the familiar slip away, has not moved at all. The dragons painted there are gone. The quiet question they marked is still very much alive, glowing faintly at the border of what we know. Listen for a moment to the sound of a deep forest. There is wind in the high branches, soft and steady. There is the creak of one tree leaning against another. There is the distant cry of a bird, the trickle of water over stone, the small rustle of something small moving through leaves. These are the sounds we expect. And these sounds, gentle as they are, may hold part of the answer to why people sometimes lose their way. Researchers who study disappearances in wild places have offered many ideas over the years. None of them explain every case. Each one explains some. Tonight we sit with a few of those ideas, the ones still being debated, and we listen for what they might mean. One theory points to sound itself. In mountains and deep canyons, sound bends in strange ways. A voice calling for help may travel far in one direction and be swallowed completely in another. A searcher only 50 steps away may hear nothing at all. The lost person, in turn, may hear shouts that seem to come from the wrong side of a ridge. They walk toward the voices. The voices move. Some scientists think this acoustic trickery, common in folded terrain, plays a quiet role in many cases. Others say it is only one small thread among many, not enough on its own. Another idea concerns infrasound. This is sound so low that human ears cannot quite catch it. Wind moving over certain cliffs, waterfalls falling into deep pools, even the steady hum of a distant storm can produce these low waves. Some researchers wonder if long exposure to infrasound can make a person feel uneasy, disoriented, even afraid without knowing why. The theory is interesting, but the evidence is thin. Other scientists point out that most hikers walk through such places without trouble, so infrasound, if it matters at all, is likely a small influence rather than a cause. A third theory looks at the brain itself. Under stress, in unfamiliar terrain, the part of the mind that holds a mental map can stumble. A person who has hiked the same trail many times may suddenly fail to recognize a turn. Researchers call this a kind of spatial confusion, and it has been observed in careful experiments. The debate is over how often it tips into true disappearance. Some say it is a major factor. Others argue that most lost hikers recover their bearings within minutes, and the rare ones who do not must be facing something else as well. There is also the long debate about clustering. Certain regions, certain mountain ranges, certain stretches of forest seem to appear again and again in missing person reports. Some writers have argued that this means something unusual is happening there. Some scientists have looked at the numbers and offered a quieter answer. These places, they say, are simply visited more, or are harder to search, or have steeper drop-offs, or colder nights. When you adjust for how many people enter and how rugged the ground is, many clusters fade. Others, oddly, do not fade as much as expected. The question stays open. no one has finished the math. Predator misidentification is another contested idea. In old reports, witnesses sometimes described shapes in the trees that did not match any known animal. Most modern researchers believe these are bears seen at strange angles, in poor light, through fog. A standing bear can look startlingly tall. A moose at dusk can seem to vanish into the brush. But survivors sometimes insist on details that do not fit. Whether these accounts reflect real anomalies or simply the unreliable nature of frightened memory is something specialists still discuss. Then there is hypothermia, that slow cooling of the body in cold air. It is well documented that people in the late stages may behave strangely. They may remove clothing. They may crawl into small spaces. They may walk in circles without knowing it. This explains many odd recoveries. It does not explain all of them. Some lost people are found in mild weather, in places where cold could not have played a role. So hypothermia is part of the story, but not the whole. What the honest scientists tend to say, when pressed, is that disappearances are not one mystery, but many. Some have ordinary explanations that were never fully gathered. Some involve small, rare combinations of weather and terrain and human error, and a few resist any neat answer at all. The debate is not really about ghosts or hidden forces. It is about how much of human behavior in extreme places we can ever fully reconstruct after the fact. So we listen to the forest. The wind keeps moving. The water keeps falling. The low hum of a distant ridge goes on just beneath our hearing. And the questions, soft and unhurried, remain. There is a quiet kind of mathematics hidden inside the mind of a lost person. It is not the math of stars or orbits, but it is just as elegant in its own way. Researchers who study how people behave when they become lost have found patterns that repeat across countries, across decades, across very different kinds of terrain. The numbers are simple. The story they tell is strange. One of the oldest findings is that a tired mind does not walk in straight lines. When a person has no landmark to fix on, no sun, no path, no distant peak, they begin to curve. Studies done in flat fields and dense forests have shown the same gentle drift again and again. The walker believes they are moving forward. In truth, they are tracing slow, looping circles, sometimes only a few 100 feet across. The body favors one leg slightly. The mind cannot correct what it cannot see. Hours pass, and the lost person ends up near where they began, without ever knowing it. There is a soft beauty in that curve. It is the same shape a leaf makes when it falls. It is the same shape a moth traces around a candle. The body, denied a steady reference, returns to the geometry of the natural world. Search planners have built quiet equations around this behavior. They speak of the average distance a lost adult travels in flat woodland. They speak of how that distance changes in mountains, in snow, in heavy brush. A healthy hiker in rolling forest tends to move between 1 and 3 miles from the point last seen before becoming truly stuck. An older walker, confused and cold, often travels less than half a mile. A child of 6 may stop within a quarter mile and curl up beneath a low branch, hidden from above. These numbers are not magic. They come from thousands of cases, gathered patiently over many years, plotted on simple charts. Searchers use them to draw rings on a map. The inner ring is where most people are found. The outer rings hold the rarer cases. The math gives the searchers somewhere to begin. Yet the rings do not always hold. Some of the cases that draw the most wondering are the ones that fall far outside the expected distance. A walker found 12 miles from the trail. A small child discovered on a ridge that should have taken adult legs to climb. The numbers describe the middle of the curve. The strange cases live in the long tail, where statistics grow thin and stories grow louder. Memory adds another fold to the puzzle. When a person becomes cold and tired and afraid, their memory begins to slip in particular ways. They forget which direction they came from. They forget how long they have been moving. They sometimes invent landmarks that match what they hope to see. Researchers call this kind of soft mistake confabulation a gentle filling in of gaps the mind cannot tolerate. The person is not lying. They simply cannot tell the difference between what happened and what should have happened. This is part of why survivor accounts can sound so dreamlike. A walker may say they heard music, or saw a light, or felt watched. Some of these reports may describe real sounds in the forest, twisted by wind and fatigue. Others may be the mind painting comfort onto fear. There is no clean way to tell which is which. The question stays open. Fatigue itself follows a kind of arithmetic. A person without sleep for one night loses fine judgment. After 2 nights, decision-making falters in measurable ways. After 3, the line between waking thought and dreaming thins. Most lost wanderers in the wilderness are found within 72 hours. And that limit is not only about cold and water. It is about the slow unraveling of the mind that does the searching from the inside. There is still much we do not understand. We do not know why some lost people, when interviewed later, describe sudden clarity at the worst moment, a feeling of stepping outside themselves and watching from above. We do not know why others, walking the same ridge in the same weather, lose all sense of time entirely and remember only fragments. The mind under stress is its own wilderness, and the maps we have for it are rough. The mathematics of the lost is gentle in the end. Curving footsteps, shrinking circles, rings drawn lightly on paper, a tired body doing what tired bodies have always done. The numbers explain a great deal. They do not explain everything. And in the space between what the numbers cover and what they cannot, the deeper question still waits, patient as the forest, asking to be wondered about a little longer. Water has a strange place in the story of wilderness disappearances. It draws people in, and it also hides what it takes. Of all the landscapes where searchers spend their long, patient days, the ones built around rivers and lakes hold some of the hardest questions. The land seems gentle here. The shoreline curves softly. The reeds bend in the breeze. And yet, a quiet pond, no wider than a small field, can keep a secret for years. The balance that makes water both life-giving and dangerous is incredibly fine. Liquid water exists on Earth only because of a narrow set of conditions. Our planet sits at just the right distance from the sun. Our atmosphere holds in just enough warmth. Shift any of those settings by a small amount, and the rivers freeze solid or boil away. The lakes that dot our forests and mountains are the result of a delicate cosmic arrangement, one that allows water to pool, to flow, to soak into the ground, and to gather in still, dark hollows. Those still, dark hollows are where some of the deepest mysteries live. A person who steps off a trail near a creek may be following the sound of running water for comfort. Streams feel like guides. They move in one direction. They suggest a path. Lost hikers often head downhill toward water, hoping to follow it out. Sometimes this works. Sometimes the stream leads into thicker brush, steeper banks, and slower, deeper pools. The very feature that promised rescue becomes the place where the trail goes cold. Search teams know this pattern well. They check the water early. Divers move slowly through cold, murky lakes, sweeping their hands across silt and sunken logs. Sonar operators watch their screens for shapes that do not belong. Many cases end here, in the quiet finding of what the water held. Many others do not end at all. A body in deep, cold water can remain hidden for a long time. The chemistry of cold like slows decay. Currents can carry a person far from where they entered. Underwater terrain, full of crevices and tangled wood, can shelter what searchers cannot see. One theory about wilderness clusters near water focuses on this hiding power. If a region holds many lakes, swamps, and rivers, then the simple math says more missing people in that region will go unfound. The landscape itself increases the mystery. Another theory pushes back. It points out that water also draws people for ordinary reasons: fishing, swimming, drinking, navigation, and that the higher number of disappearances near water may just reflect higher human use of those places. Both ideas may carry truth. Both leave room for doubt. Cold water adds another layer to the puzzle. A person who falls into a mountain lake in summer can lose strength within minutes. The shock of the cold steals breath. Muscles stop responding. Swimmers who could cross a warm pool with ease cannot pull themselves to a nearby shore. Survivors describe the strange feeling of watching their own arms refuse to move. This narrow biological window, the small range of temperatures, in which a human body keeps working in water, is part of the fragile balance that makes us who we are. Rivers carry their own quiet danger. A current that looks slow from the bank can pull harder than expected. Smooth water sometimes hides a strong undertow shaped by stones below the surface. A foot caught between rocks underwater can hold a person in place against a force they cannot fight. Searchers downstream often find belongings long before they find anything else. A hat caught in branches, a boot wedged against a log. The river keeps moving, and the items it releases offer only fragments of the story. Folklore around the world recognizes this pull. Cultures along great rivers tell of spirits in the deep places, of bends where the water seems to want company. These stories are not evidence of anything supernatural. They are evidence of long memory. Generations watched the same dark pools claim travelers, and they wrapped that knowledge in warning. Scientists today might use different language, speaking of hydraulics and hypothermia and visibility. The underlying caution is the same. What remains unresolved is how much of the wilderness water mystery is hiding and how much is happening. Are lakes and rivers simply the world's best concealers, gathering up the ordinary tragedies of the wild and burying them in cold silence? Or do certain stretches of water draw a higher share of disappearances for reasons we have not yet measured? The honest answer is that we do not know. The water keeps its own counsel, calm on the surface, deep and quiet below. Among the many threads that run through wilderness disappearance reports, one stands out for the gentle puzzle it presents. From time to time, when a small child goes missing in rough country, that child is later found in a place that seems hard to reach. Up a steep slope, across a creek, past a tangle of brush, a grown adult would struggle to push through. The distances are not always large, sometimes only a mile or two, but the terrain in between can seem strangely unfit for small legs. These stories have gathered into a loose pattern in the folklore of search and rescue. Older searchers sometimes share them around quiet campfires, voices low, more curious than alarmed. A toddler found resting on a ridge that took the rescue team an hour to climb. A young child found across a river the search team had to wade. The children themselves, when old enough to speak, often remember little. They were tired. They walked. Someone gave them food. They slept. The details are gentle and vague, like the edges of a dream. What we do not know yet is how often this really happens, and how often it only seems to happen because the strange cases are the ones we remember. Human memory is drawn to the odd story. The 100 quiet recoveries near the last known point fade away. The one recovery far up a mountain stays with us for years. Researchers who study this carefully would want to count every case, not only the surprising ones. And that careful counting has not really been done. Still, the cases that do surface raise honest questions. How does a 3-year-old climb a slope that taxes a trained adult? One idea is simple and biological. Small children have low centers of gravity, light bodies, and a tireless way of moving when they are not yet aware of danger or distance. They scramble on hands and feet in ways adults forget how to do. A toddler can sometimes pass through brush an adult must cut. The forest is, in a way, closer to their size. Another idea looks at time. A missing child may be moving for many hours before the search begins. In that quiet stretch, a small body walking slowly can cover surprising ground. Children do not always follow trails or take the easy route. They follow what catches their eye. A flower, a bird, a glint of water. Their path can wander far from any line an adult would draw. By the time searchers begin, the child may be well outside the circle that logic suggests. Cold and fear also shape what small bodies do. A frightened child sometimes hides from the very people calling their name. The unfamiliar voices in the woods feel like strangers. Children have been found tucked under logs, curled in hollow trees, pressed quietly into the roots of an old pine, listening as the search passes by. This alone can make recovery distances appear strange. The child did not travel further. The searchers simply walked past, and the child stayed quiet. There are also gentler, harder questions. Why do some children, when finally found, speak of a kind stranger or a friendly animal? One possibility is the soft logic of a tired young mind. A small child alone in the dark, cold and afraid, may build a comforting figure out of the shapes around them. The mind protects itself. A breeze in the leaves becomes a voice. A passing deer becomes a friend. Another possibility is simpler still. The child remembers fragments, mixed with dreams from the long sleep that often follows rescue. We do not know which explanation fits any single case. We may never know. What stays open is the larger question. Is there a real pattern here? Or is this the shape memory gives to scattered events? Some researchers think the cases are unusual enough to deserve careful study. Others think the brain of a small child, the soft body that fits through small spaces, and the long head, start of unwatched wandering, already explain most of what we see. Both views have weight. Neither has been proven. For tonight, the puzzle can rest where it is. A small figure moving through tall grass at dusk. A search team fanning out under lanterns. A quiet ridge somewhere high above, waiting. And the gentle, unresolved fact that small children in the wild sometimes turn up in places that do not quite match our maps. The forest holds these stories the way it holds everything else. Lightly, without explanation, with a patience that does not need hours. The answers, if they come, will come slowly. The wondering can stay with us until then, soft as moss, settling into the spaces between what we know and what we do not. Step away from the great forests for a little while and turn toward the edges of the land, the places where water meets stone, islands rising from cold seas, long peninsulas reaching out like the fingers of a sleeping hand, quiet harbors where small boats are tied with old rope, rocking gently in the dark. These edges of the world have their own collection of unresolved disappearance stories, and like the forest cases, they ask questions we cannot fully answer. An island feels small when you look at it on a map. Just a shape in the sea, often no larger than a town. And yet people do go missing on islands. They walk a coastal path in the late afternoon. They wander toward a quiet cove to watch the tide, and they are not seen again. The land is bounded. The sea is everywhere around. Searchers comb every meadow and every gully, Sometimes the person is found cold and confused in a place already searched. Sometimes they are never found at all. The mystery feels sharper on an island because the space is so finite. Where in such a small world can a person go? Peninsulas hold a similar puzzle. A long arm of land, narrow and salt-bitten, with the ocean on 3 sides. Fog rolls in from the water and folds the headlands into soft gray cloth. The trails twist along cliffs. The wind carries the sound of waves from directions that shift hour by hour. A walker who knows the path in clear weather may not know it at all in fog. One theory is that disorientation here is amplified by the way water surrounds the senses, removing the usual landmarks of inland travel. A competing view holds that peninsulas simply funnel many walkers into the same narrow places. So the ordinary rate of accidents only appears unusual. The question is open. Small boats add another layer. Around the world, people set out in calm, whether in modest craft, a skiff, a kayak, a weathered fishing boat with a single engine. Some return, some do not. The boat is sometimes found drifting empty, the engine still warm, a coat folded on the seat. Sometimes the boat is never found either, and the sea simply keeps its silence. Coastal investigators have a long list of plain explanations. A wave from the side, a slip on a wet deck, a sudden squall over the horizon. These explanations cover most cases, but a handful of disappearances remain strange even after every plain answer is considered. And those are the ones that drift through harbor towns as stories. What might happen to these mysteries in the deeper future? The shape of the question itself will change. Coastlines do not stay where they are. Over thousands of years, sea levels rise and fall. Islands that exist today will be drowned by warmer seas, their coastal trails covered by shallow water, their old harbors swallowed. Other islands will appear where now there is only ocean, lifted by slow geology or revealed by retreating ice. The places where boats vanish today may, in 1,000,000 years, be open sea above a sunken plain. The places where walkers vanish on peninsulas may become inland hills, far from any shore. 1,000,000 years is enough rework most coastlines completely. 1 billion years is enough to rearrange the continents into shapes no human has ever seen. Some scientists think the landmasses will gather again into one great supercontinent, the way they have done before in Earth's long story. If that happens, the edges of the world as we know them will not exist. The very category of island and peninsula will be redrawn. The strange cases of today will be old beyond imagining, and the new wildernesses will hold their own quiet riddles, watched by whatever curious minds are present then. And further still, the sun itself will change. Long before it grows large and red, its slow warming will reshape the oceans and the air. The shorelines we know will be unrecognizable, yet the basic shape of the mystery seems unlikely to vanish. Wherever there is wild ground and water and weather, there will be travelers. Wherever there are travelers, there will be a few who do not return. The setting will move. The story will not. For now, in our own brief moment, the islands keep their fogs, and the peninsulas keep their winds. Empty boats are still found drifting on quiet mornings, their owners gone into a silence the sea does not explain. We list every cause we can think of. We hold the open question with care, and we let the slow tide carry it forward into whatever shape the future chooses to give it. Step back now. Step all the way back. Picture the whole of it at once, the way you might picture a single drop of water held up to the light. Every person who has ever wandered into the trees and not come home was made of the same things as the trees themselves. The carbon in their hands, the carbon in the bark, the same element arranged in different patterns, shaped by the same slow chemistry. The water in their blood once moved through clouds, through rivers, through the bodies of creatures that lived long before there were people to name them. We are not separate from the wilderness we walk into. We are made of it. We return to it. That thought sits at the center of every unsolved case that lingers. A person walks into the forest. The forest is the same matter they are. When they do not come back, the matter does not vanish. It changes form. It joins the moss, the soil, the slow, patient cycles that have been turning here for billions of years. Knowing this does not solve the mystery. It only places the mystery inside a much larger one. The calcium in human bones was forged inside dying stars. So was the calcium in the limestone walls of every cave a searcher has ever crawled through. The iron in our blood, the iron in the red rocks of the desert canyons, the iron in the cold rivers of the high country. All of it came from the same ancient furnaces, scattered across unimaginable distances before drifting together to form this small blue world. When a hiker steps onto a mountain trail, ancient stardust is walking on ancient stardust. The mystery of where they go in the end is a mystery happening inside a much older story. The wilderness has been here far longer than we have. The granite slabs above treeline cooled from molten rock long before there were eyes to see them. The bogs sat in their slow silence for thousands of years before anyone first stepped near their edge. The deep lakes were carved by glaciers that retreated before recorded history began. Against that scale, a single human life is brief, and a single human absence is a small ripple in a very old pond. This does not make any loss smaller to the people who feel it. It places that loss in the company of every other ripple the earth has ever held. There is a quiet comfort in that company. The unsolved cases that linger are not the only unsolved things on this planet. We do not know where all the water came from. We do not know how life first began in the warm, shallow seas. We do not know why the magnetic poles flip, or what truly stirs in the deepest trenches, or how many species share the forests with us right now, unrecorded and unnamed. The earth keeps far more secrets than it tells. The Vanishings are one chapter in a very long book of things we have not yet learned to read. Perhaps that is the perspective worth carrying into sleep. The wilderness is not an enemy. It is not a hungry thing waiting at the edge of the map. It is simply old and vast and full of folds and weathers and quiet places that do not arrange themselves to suit us. When someone disappears into it, the wilderness does not know. It continues. The fog rolls in. The wind moves through the pines. The streams run downhill. The stars turn overhead, made of the same stuff as everything below. We are tiny, brief, curious creatures on a planet whose stories began long before us and will continue long after. The mysteries we cannot solve are not failures. They are the natural shape of being small inside something enormous. The people we have not found are part of the earth now, in one form or another, just as we will all one day be part of the earth. The atoms move on. The patterns continue. The wonder does not end. Hold that gently as the night settles around you. The same calcium, the same carbon, the same iron, the same water moving through clouds and rivers, and the small warm body resting under a blanket. You are made of the wilderness. The wilderness is made of stars. The stars are older than thought. And somewhere in the quiet between all those facts, the unsolved cases sit, not as wounds, but as open questions held inside a much larger silence. That silence is not empty. It is full of everything that has ever been, slowly turning, slowly becoming something else, with no need for us to understand it before we sleep. We have come a long way together tonight, through old forests and high passes, across deserts and bogs, along the shores of cold lakes and the rims of granite slopes. We have sat with stories that have no endings and questions that no one has yet been able to answer. And now, as this last quiet stretch begins, there is nothing more to learn. There is only the soft work of letting the wondering settle, like snow falling on dark trees. The wilderness is still out there, even now. The same fog still drifts through the same valleys. The same wind still moves through the same pines, making that low and gentle sound that has been heard for thousands of years. Somewhere a search team is folding a map. Somewhere else, a family is keeping a porch light on. And somewhere quieter still, a forest is simply being a forest, holding its old shapes and its old silences with no interest in being understood. We have asked, across these many hours, why certain places seem to gather these stories. Why some ridges, some swamps, some stretches of pine appear again and again in the records. Some researchers see real clusters in the data. Others see only the natural shape of where people walk, where weather turns, where terrain folds in on itself. Both views may hold pieces of the truth. The question stays open, the way a window stays open on a soft summer night? Maybe the answer is simply that the wild is large and we are small, and the human mind reaches for patterns because patterns are how we feel safe. Maybe the clusters are real, born of magnetic quirks, or hidden caves, or microclimates we have not yet mapped. Maybe both things are true at once. The wilderness does not seem in any hurry to tell us which. Picture for a moment the earth as it is right now. A blue and white sphere turning slowly in the dark. Vast oceans resting under moonlight, their surfaces silvered and calm. Long shadows moving across deserts as the planet rotates. Forests breathing out their slow, cool breath into the night air. Glaciers settling inch by inch into older shapes. Rivers running quietly toward the sea, as they have run for longer than any human memory can hold. And on this turning planet, somewhere you are resting, warm and safe, and held by a small pocket of stillness. The mysteries are out there. The fog is out there. The granite slopes and the quiet bogs and the high passes are all out there, doing what they have always done. But none of them need anything from you tonight. They have been keeping their secrets for a very long time, and they are content to keep them a little longer. It is a strange and beautiful thing to live on a world we do not fully understand, to walk through forests whose deepest patterns still escape us, to stand at the edge of a lake and know that there are things about this planet, about its hidden corners and its rare events, that no living person has yet pieced together. That feeling, that gentle not knowing, is not a frightening thing. It is one of the oldest companions of being human. Our ancestors felt it by their fires. We feel it now, lying still in the dark. Some of these mysteries may be solved in our lifetime. New tools, better maps, careful study, kind attention. Some of them may not be solved for centuries. Some may never be solved at all. And that is all right. A world without any open questions would be a quieter, smaller world than the one we actually live in. The unsolved parts are part of what makes the planet feel alive. So let the questions drift now. Let the ridges and the rivers and the deep pine woods fade into a soft, blurred background. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders sink. The earth is turning gently. The way it always has. The moon is moving across some far ocean. A breeze is touching some sleeping forest. And here, in your quiet room, none of it is asking anything of you. You are small, and the planet is vast, and the vastness is kind. It has carried every person who has ever lived through every long night into every soft morning. It will carry you, too, into the morning that comes after this one. There is nothing left to figure out tonight. There is only rest. Subscribe for a brand new Earth topic every night. One tap, and something wonderful is waiting for you tomorrow. Sweet dreams.